Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the second day of our Asia Pacific Rural Development and Food Security Forum 2022. Before we start the session today, let me take this opportunity to recap of our main activities and the messages from yesterday, the first day of the forum. Yesterday, we had two sessions. One, a leaders roundtable on future of food and agriculture, and the second one, a technical session on digital technology for agriculture. And we are pleased to see that more than 350 participants very actively participated in these sessions. And as you know, this forum is taking place at a time when the global food prices reached a record high level, and which, as expected, dominated the discussions yesterday. The Leaders' Roundtable made two very specific recommendations to withstand the temporal challenges. The first one is to strengthen the global food supply chains by eliminating any kind of trade barriers, but at the same time, they also highlighted that the local capacity building to increase production efficiently and globally competitively is also very important. The second point they made is to enhance global support and investment to produce more food in regions like Asia and Africa, which are least affected so far by the ongoing political and economic conflicts in Europe. It was strongly emphasized by the leaders that the bumper harvest in the next production cycles in this region is a must to tackle the looming threats to food crisis. Now, turning to the medium and long-term perspective of food and agriculture, the leaders emphasized a purposeful disruptions in two fronts. The first one is in the current mode of yield maximizing approach. They mentioned that since mid-1960s, world has been pursuing yield maximization to increase production per unit of land through increased use of agri-inputs and mechanization, but unfortunately without paying adequate attention to resource cost and the climate change. These technologies have to be replaced by knowledge-intensive, nature-positive precision agriculture to maximize production, for example, per drop of water, not only per unit of land, and with minimum impact on nature and the climate. The second disruption they suggested is in the current policy and institutional paradigms, which are affected by inconsistencies and loaded with incentive distorting public measures. A holistic policy support involving promotion of finance, research and development, rationalization of subsidy and other fiscal measures should be undertaken. Now, coming to the technical sessions on digital agriculture, the digital divide and inclusiveness across and within the countries dominated the discussions in the technical sessions yesterday. Two very specific solutions were highlighted. First, to develop customized and context-aware digital solutions for small farmers. And the second, to empower the small farmers by supporting their digital literacy to use those solutions. And examples of using integrated and inclusive digital solutions from Vietnam, India, People's Republic of China, and Philippines were discussed, highlighting their efficiencies to reach out to the marginal farmers and households. The session also discussed the usefulness of big data and also the potential danger of its misinterpretation. Therefore, capacity building to use the big data was properly and duly highlighted in the session. And finally, the session on the digital agriculture also identified three key actions to promote application of digital solutions in all segments of the agricultural value chain. And they are, the first, creation of an enabling environment for private sector participation and entrepreneurial spirit. The second, building of digital infrastructure, and third is mobilization of public investments to crowd in private investment in digital agriculture. So in summary, this is what we have discussed, our sessions discussed yesterday. We had a very productive first day of the forum, which sets the scene for further discussions today and tomorrow, and we are looking forward to an equally productive day ahead. At this stage, now may I request Mr. Brajesh Pant, Chief of Education Thematic Group, Asian Development Bank, to start our first session of the day. Mr. Pant, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bashir. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. Welcome to this deep dive session on the role of education in reducing rural-urban divide. I am Brajesh Pant, Chief of Education Sector Group at the Sustainable Development and Climate Change Department, Asian Development Bank, and I'll be moderating this session. We'll start with the welcome remarks by Mr. Xingfeng Zhang, who is the Chief of the Rural Development and Food Security Thematic Group at ADB. Mr. Zhang is providing leadership to the formulation and implementation of the bank's strategy and the knowledge in agriculture and oversees the operationalization of the bank's vision on agriculture, natural resources, and food security in regional and country programs. He holds a doctoral degree in environmental engineering from Tsinghua University and a master's degree in water resources management from Sichuan University. Xingfeng, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Brajesh. Yesterday, we had a very successful sessions on the leaders roundtable on a future of food. And we also have a very deep discussion about digital agriculture. Today, I am very delighted to welcome all of you to have this deep dive session on the role of the education in reducing the rural and the urban divide. This session is jointly hosted by the Education Sector Group, and we're very grateful for the Brajesh's leadership. Again, strengthening rural education is an essential part of the integrated rural development, a key pillar of the ADB's operational priority 5 under the strategy 2030. Asia and the Pacific countries have experienced strong economic growth over the last decades, where urban-rural divide has significantly increased. In rural areas where around half of the regional population live, facing a high probability of poverty and also the informal employment, hindering sustained development and also their inclusive growth. A large share of the workers in the rural regions is employed in informal or the vulnerable rather than the decent jobs. In most DMCs, the government's development priorities and also activities are significantly only focused on the urban areas. Reducing the income gap between the rural and the urban areas is crucial for sustainable and also inclusive growth. The quality and access to the services, including basic education and health, water and sanitation, roads and the energy, and of course now is the digital connectivity, are lagging behind in rural areas compared to those counterparts in urban areas. This disparity created by the urban bias has led to the economic conditions that put the rural population as a major disadvantage and also induce the young and the skilled people to migrate to urban areas. A critical factor is that the quality of the education in rural and lagging region is often significantly worse than the urban areas. For example, according to one of the books published by my friend Scott, they are like in the PRC, 83% of the children in city areas attended high school, where only 40% of the rural children to do so. Analysis also show the rural-urban divide is an intertrend with the urban-rural divide in education. Therefore, countries need to pay very much attention to rural education, not only just for economic development, but also for improving the equity. Today's session will have a focused and in-depth discussions on the role of the education in reducing urban and rural divide. I'm deeply grateful for my friend, Professor Scott Rosell from Stanford University, who can use his precious time to share his insights with us. 2 weeks ago, when I met with Professor Rosell in Stanford University, I also share my great appreciations for his impactful book, Invisible China, How the Urban-Rural Divide Threatens China's Rise. His book has profoundly changed the mindset of the top policymakers in the PRC government, and also they changed the mindset of the senior management and in our international community, particularly in terms of the rural development. So I'm very look forward the vision, insights, and the strategies from the distinguished speakers and the eminent researchers from the academic, civil society, development practitioners to promote more inclusive growth. I'm sure presentations today will generate active discussions from the audiences and also will inspire our practitioners in the MDBs to promote the closer cooperation between the rural development and also education and the training to reduce the urban rural divide, and sometimes also to improve the quality of the life in the rural areas. With that, thank you so much, Rajesh, and over back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Xingfeng, for a warm welcome and highlighting the challenges faced by rural areas in the region and the critical importance of education in addressing these gaps. Building on Xingfeng's remark, this session will explore how education can contribute to reducing the rural-urban divide and support sustainable and inclusive economic growth. We are at a critical juncture since the COVID-19 pandemic has disrupted almost everything and exacerbated pre-existing inequities. The pandemic also has had monumental impact on learning and earning losses. To turn the crisis into an opportunity, we must remind ourselves about the important lessons we have learned from the past and focus on emerging opportunities that require cross-sector collaboration and holistic development, including life cycle and whole of government approaches. To respond to the existential threat of climate change and to tap on the enormous opportunities unleashed by digital technologies, we have to balance our development efforts through human-centric approaches. Since education is the biggest enabler and equalizer, scaling up the quantity and quality of education is one of the most effective ways of reducing not only the rural-urban divide, but many other forms of inequities. In this session, we have eminent researchers and practitioners who will share the rich experience and insights on how they see the role of education in reducing this divide. First, we'll have the keynote address by Professor Scott Rosell, who is professor and senior fellow in the Freeman Spogli Institute of International Studies in Stanford University. He co-directs the Stanford Center on China's Economy and Institutions. His work focuses on many aspects of the rural economy of the People's Republic of China. He has received many awards from the PRC government and is an adjunct professor in 10 different universities in the PRC. Without further ado, Professor Rosell, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Barshesh and Ching Feng. I appreciate this, and for the whole staff. Let me share my screen here, and I'll get going. So I tried. This is going to be a talk mostly about China, but I'm going to be trying to relate it to how poor levels of human capital basically threaten all middle-income economies, many Asian economies. And I call it the invisible sectors, the rural sector. So why we need, it's exactly what Barshesh told us is why focusing on rural education is important, not only for rural people and equality, but also for growth. So, right, we know the rise of Asia. Most of Asia, East, Southeast, South Asia are growing. A majority, yeah, COVID has hurt us a little for sure, but over the past 20 years, a majority of nations are now in a bracket known as middle income. And the goal of everyone of these countries is to continue to climb. They want to go to middle, upper middle, and then of course on to high income. That's the goal there. But in many countries, there's a crisis lurking. Okay, in most nations at the time of middle income, it's a problem that's what I call invisible, right? It's invisible China, the invisible sector, and there are many things. So, and basically, it's like this: there's many things that are needed, many things we know that are needed to climb through middle income, to escape the middle income trap, right? Countries need good macro policies. They need high quality infrastructure. They need export success, right? I mean, and many Asian countries have done that, right? Or working to improve them. Of course, some don't, and there's challenges in the years to come to provide them. So, that's our basic list. But there's one more key element that seems to be aligned, especially at the time of middle income, and that's the nature of the human capital of the labor force. And this is when countries are still in middle income. And what I'm gonna show you is that the human capital of the labor force, and this I mean everyone in the economy from 18 to 65, has to be quite high at middle income. And you can't wait until high income. And I'm going to show you why. Okay, there's much less discussion of this compared to macro policy and exports and infrastructure. One reason I think is because investment in the human capital of the whole labor force takes decades to create, right? It's not change your macro policy or build a railroad or build new roads, right? This is something that takes 10, 20, 30 years. So countries have to start now. And it's initially an element that it has a low rate, although it is a really low rate of return to invest in human capital for a labor force when you're at middle income. You don't need math, science, computers, language when you're middle income, but you need those when you go to high income. When you get to high income, the return to these skills are really, really high. And if you don't get it, it can be disastrous. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to show three things today. I want to do theory, the importance of human capital to be able to graduate from middle income to high income. So why we need to start now. I'm going to look at the case of China, and then I'm going to very briefly touch on some lessons for other Asian countries. So what's invisible China? So invisible China is rural China. It's the rural population that we talked about. And I can write a book about this because out of 10 people in the world, one person is in rural China. Yeah, 2 US populations, okay? And they're in the factories, they're out they're doing service sector, they're farming, right? They're the grandmas and the kids and they live in the rural areas and they live in in the suburbs, in the alleys of the cities, okay? When I first started working in China 40 years ago, rural China wasn't invisible. People went through there, they stayed there, they had relatives there. But today it's quite invisible, right? Planes fly over, high-speed rails pass through the villages so fast. I like to take photos. I'm not a good photographer, but you can't take a photo of a village from a high-speed train that's going 350 kilometers an hour. You know, this is the China we know, right? And you know, we don't know the other China. So just my own story is I've been working in China. This is what I did my PhD dissertation work. My son is older than me now, but I still go to the field and try to figure out what's happening. And this is, I'm going to be sharing with you some of the things I see. So part one, theory. Okay, how does poor human capital in certain sectors of the economy of Asian nations threaten the rise of those countries? Okay, in the case of China, it's why does invisible China threaten China's rise? But why is this a problem in all Asian countries? This is a very important graph. I'm going to show you. It's the only graph. Okay, I think I have one more. But look at this is income 60, 70 years ago, and this is income today. These are poor countries like, you know, Myanmar, Congo, Ethiopia, okay? Here are rich countries, okay? Rich before, so these are OECD countries, Norway, Canada, Australia, Japan, the US, okay? There. I'm interested in two sets of countries, okay? And I think most Asian countries are. And these are the countries that have graduated from middle income to high income in the past 60 years. And I want you to notice two things. There's not very many of them, okay? And the last time for a country to do that was more than 20 years ago. It was South Korea graduated. It's really hard to do, okay? And it doesn't happen very much. And, you know, so it's the Israel, the Ireland, the South Korea, Taiwan territory, Singapore, you know, these are the countries that have graduated from middle income. I want to compare that to the trap. Look at most countries in the world are trapped. That means for 70 years they're middle income, right? They grow and grow and stagnate, and when they grow and collapse, you know, is people get hurt, right? And we don't feel it in the US, we don't feel it in, you know, when something happens in Thailand, we don't necessarily feel it in Japan, but certainly in Thailand, people feel it. So, you know, so the question is why are some of these countries can't get up to here? And what I say is one of the real differences between those countries and these countries is at the time of middle income in the graduates, the human capital of the labor force, the level of education of the whole labor has to already be high. Okay, so it's you can't wait till you get up there and then educate everyone. Okay, and so look at this. Okay, this is OECD countries. So in OECD, you need some people without high education, but most people need to be educated, right? 7 or 8 out of 10 have gone to high school. They know math and science and language and computers, okay? Because that's what you need to have a job in a developing country. Look at the middle income grads. This is the Ireland's, Israel's, South Korea's. At the time they were middle income, they had, when they were middle income, they already had high level income countries of education, okay? So, and this is going to be very, very important. But look at the trapped. Okay, oops, sorry. The middle income grads have 7 out of 10. Okay, but look at the trap. It's 3 out of 10. It's Turkey and Brazil, Mexico, Thailand, Malaysia, right? Indonesia, Pakistan, Philippines. These are middle income countries, and most of them have fairly low levels of education. That on average only 36%. Look at, compare the trapped to the graduates, right? Twice the level. Okay. And why is this important? Well, when a country moves from middle income to high income, wages rise and the nature of work changes. Low wage, low skill, high wage, high skill. And if the labor force isn't ready for that, what happens? You get this polarization, demand side problems, unemployment, informality, high crime, social unrest, and you have supply side problems. Nobody wants to invest in a country that has high crime or social unrest. There's an absence of qualified workers, and you get more polarization, more stagnation, and you're trapped in that middle income. I think this is a very, very important thing. So let's look at the case study of China now. Here's China. It's clearly middle income. It's moving up here pretty fast. We all know China's growing pretty fast. While all kids need to go to college, don't need to go to college. All kids should be going to high school, or most kids. So where is China? You'll probably be shocked with this. China is one of the lowest educated countries in the whole middle income world, certainly the upper middle income world. It's super low. And this isn't my data, this is the census data, okay, where they ask 1.4 billion people, what was your education level? And only 30%, only 3 out of 10 people had ever been to high school, okay? How does it compare to the rest of the world? Look at China is lower than South Africa. It's lower than Thailand. It's lower than Malaysia. It's about the same as Indonesia, okay? And it's lower than Mexico. It's lower than Turkey, okay? Way, way lower than the middle income grads, okay? What it means, if only 30% of the graduate, means that 70% are high school dropouts. It actually means they've never been to a day of high school. And what's the problem? Well, in a high income country like the US, okay, if you're a high school dropout, you don't have skills in science and math, computers and language, guess what? There's a 5 times higher probability that you'll be in jail, unemployed, on welfare, disabled, or homeless, rather than having a middle income life. Lots and lots of social instability, okay? And that now, you know, luckily for us, only 20% of our labor force has never been to high school, okay? And it's a big problem. And this is true for all high income countries. So is this affecting China's economy now? Let's see, you know, how it works in different parts of the world. Look what happens here is you have huge parts of the economy that are in these informal sectors that they're trying to push up to high income, but these guys can't get a job. They get dumped into the informal sector, selling for, you can see Argentina's 50%. Look at Indonesia's 70%. India is 60%. Huge parts of the economy, labor force, they aren't covered by labor laws. They don't belong to a unit. That they don't have social services. This is the informal economy, as you guys all know that, and they live in these places, the informal economy. I think Santiago Levy used to be a professor at Harvard. He's now IADB, he's your colleague over in the Inter-American Development Bank. He talks about the Mexican paradise. Remember what I said? This is him talking about Mexico. Mexico has had great macroeconomic performance. They've had good physical accumulation of capital. They've had export success. It sounds like China. It sounds like many countries in Asia, but they haven't grown in 30 years because productivity is stagnated. The informal sector is too large. People don't have the human capital skills to participate in the formal sector. Okay, and there's Mexico. Many times I'm talking about Mexico, I'm talking about China. They say, you're talking about Mexico. Hasn't China already made it? Okay. And what I often say is, we thought Mexico had made it in the 1980s. Mexico is a member of OECD. It was a high income country. And now for all these years, it hasn't grown once. It was called the next Taiwan. And I think this human capital problem has really solve into it. So where is China in this, in the stage of nations, right? Oops, sorry. Let's go down here. Yeah, here it is right here. Is this affecting China today? Let's look at two key indicators, employment and wages. And look what happens as China starts to move up through middle income. The rural sector can't keep up, and they start shifting. Here, 60% of China's economy, or 70%, was in the formal sector. Today, it's down to 40%. So you go from most people in the formal sector to most people in the informal jobs. And so they've risen like this, and they're starting to pull down this formal sector. And because look what's happening. Manufacturing falls, construction falls. The good news is skill intensive jobs, professors and doctors are going, but look at labor intensive is going up. And what's happening as everybody gets dumped into the sector, down goes wages, and wages are falling. The supply of informal workers is outpacing the demand for them, and that's going. So what's driving these trends? It's automation, okay? It's globalization, right? It's a COVID-19 recession, and we're going to see more and more of this into the future. And I think that this is that what are 500 million workers in Asia going to be doing? So this is my last slide. What are the lessons for the rest of Asia? I think that the chance of China being pulled down by this and its growth stopping is high. It's not for sure, but I think that it's one of those things that they really need to take seriously right now. But if you're in other parts of Asia that's still at lower middle income, human capital is important, okay? You must start early. It takes 20 or 30 years to raise the human capital of your labor force. And how do you do it? Massive education, health, early childhood development. Maybe don't build so many high-speed rails, put more money in education. You need to balance that and make sure that this has the high priority. So I want to thank everyone for listening, and your comments are always welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Rogel, for your powerful analysis and reflection, excuse me, to underscore the importance of investing in human capital development in general, and in the workforce in particular, to move up the value chain from lower middle income to higher middle income and higher income labor. Thank you very much for that, and I'm sure this will generate a lot of discussions. Now we'll hear from three experienced speakers who will bring complementary perspectives. We'll start with Ms. Clarissa Delgado, who is the co-founder and CEO of Teach for the Philippines. Our focus is in addressing the broader twin challenges of high quality teaching and system level change. TFP, Teach for the Philippines, provides its teachers an avenue to engage in public policy to reinforce trust in public institutions. TFP trained teachers are also catalysts for change in communities across the country. Today, TFP is a nationwide movement that has trained 350 Filipinos and taught close to 90,000 public school students. Clarissa, please go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much, Brajesh, and thank you everyone for having me here. Dr. Rosell, thank you so much for your presentation. I'm glad to share that the perspectives that I've been asked to speak about today, which are about perspectives on rural Philippine education from the front lines, from teachers, are fully aligned with everything that you brought up. And so without further ado, let me just start my very brief presentation. just to set up context, I wanted to talk a little bit about the 3 programs that I run, just so that the remaining few slides that I have make sense. So Teach for the Philippines runs 3 different programs that address education at different levels. We are a pipeline of new teachers into the public school system. We work with already existing government teachers. And then we also work at the education administration level by working with policymakers, and also are a pipeline of individuals and human capital, in essence, into education and youth policy. This is an additional context slide. So to Dr. Rizal's point, the Philippines, and you ask, where are our human capital statistics today? This is from the World Bank, and it synthesized the last 3 international assessments that the Philippines took. 80% of our students are simply unable to meet the learning standards that we've set out as a global community. So moving forward, I have 4 insights to share and some parting thoughts. The first is about our students. So, and the responsibility a teacher has in reaching them, especially in rural communities. About 80% or more of the schools that I work with across the Philippine archipelago are rural. Teachers in these areas have to work doubly hard just to carry out their basic roles. There are infrastructure challenges, societal belief, and resource scarcity, for example, hunger. In many instances, teachers are the only individuals able to bridge these gaps. And so I feel like one important aspect of our work is always being mindful of the time and energies of our teachers as we approach them to participate in our programs or for coaching and training, simply because what it means to be a teacher in a rural community has so many additional roles over and on top of what we think of. These are some pictures of our teachers that do home visits to their students, and you can see that these are quite a bit more physical and labor intensive than one would have in an urban community, perhaps not unlike what Dr. Rizal would have seen in China, in rural China. School leaders also need to be equipped properly, and I guess I would emphasize here that training does not necessarily need to be in pedagogy or methodology. We find from our on-the-ground experience that school teachers and principals in the rural communities often have to do fundraising on their own, networking. And so we feel that perhaps a broader curriculum for the kind of training that we offer, whether it's in fundraising or networking or crisis management, would be welcome, because as I mentioned, their roles encompass so much more than what is traditionally considered appropriate. Our current human capital are the parents, and oftentimes parents in rural areas have at most an elementary school are an elementary school graduates or have never even been to school in the first place. We often compete for priorities. Oftentimes the conversation is whether to eat or to go to school, and I think that's really just highlighting the kind of false dichotomy that we need to work to avoid, that we need to work in a society where you can have both. And many times the parents' perspectives on commitment to education are what are the greatest influence on the children. Our program works directly with parents. So these are some pictures of our teachers that are going above and beyond and doing workshops with parents to get them to commit and changing the mindsets of entire families towards education and the opportunities that education can open up for them. So again, to the point of Dr. Rizal and investing in broadening or changing the mindsets about both the nation and also the individuals in the nation about education, so that all of us can succeed. And finally, this is to Brajesh's point when he opened up our panel, which is about the whole of government approach. So we find and teach for the Philippines that the Department of Education needs all of our help, needs alignment across various agencies to successfully raise the quality of education in our country. And I suspect from what was shared by the other by our keynote speaker and what may be shared by our other panelists and other, this should not look dissimilar to other countries in our region. But we need the whole of government to approach to successfully raise the quality of education in rural Philippines. It simply cannot be done alone, whether that looks like simple physical infrastructure, so maybe not high-speed rails, but definitely paved public roads, information and communication infrastructure, because word of mouth can only go so far. And then social safety nets, like what was mentioned by Dr. Rizal, we see that as well, access to health centers and greater access to early childhood education. My final policy and research notes and parting thoughts are there are three efforts that have already been done or are being implemented by the government, and maybe to give context to those on the call from the Philippines would be a good place to start if anyone was interested in pursuing these further. So there has been the school-based management approach. It's a good time to perhaps look again at the successes and challenges with that. Clearer research onto the individual socioeconomic status of rural communities might help. And then also in 2019, the DepEd released an order prioritizing the development of last mile schools, and seeing as we are now a couple years out, it might be good to revisit the implementation of that policy and see if it can shed light on the synergies that have worked or have not in the last few years. And so that's really what I have to share with you today. And just very glad to be able to bring the voices of our teachers and school leaders to this forum, and the work that they do every day to make it work for this country. So thank you so much, Brajesh, and thank you to my co-panelists and all for having me.
Thank you very much, Clarissa, for sharing this. Indeed, the key messages I'm taking from your presentation include pedagogy, quality of pedagogy, to make sure that everyone is learning, the governance aspect, school-based management, how resources are managed to achieve that, and also in that process, the community involvement, the partnership, I think is key to mobilize that support, which also came out quite conspicuously during the pandemic. So thank you very much for that. Now we'll move to our next speaker, Professor Saidul Rahman, who is professor and former head of the Department of Agricultural Economics. He is currently the director of the Institute of Agribusiness and Development Studies in Bangladesh Agricultural University. He also has long experience working with rural people. He holds MSc in development and resource economics from the Norwegian University of Life Sciences, and PhD from a collaborative program with the International Rice Research Institute in the Philippines and Purdue University in the US. Professor Rahman, the floor is yours. We are keen to hear different perspective from university side. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Brajesh, for your nice introduction. I am very happy to be with all of you, and Mark will help me to move the slides. Thank you, Mark, for presenting in here. I will talk on particularly the changes and innovation and rural economy, and how education can contribute for new changes in rural economy, particularly Bangladesh case. Next slide. I will put some overview from Bangladesh, China, and India from literature, as well as I will mention some of the things probable changes made and can be made to address the gap of rural economy through the urban rural balancing. So many of you may know the secondary school certificate result this year. It's clearly mentioned that most urban schools dominating the top of the list. So that Scott already mentioned here. In Bangladesh, we can see the dominance, the pattern of education, particularly in the urban areas. Urban schools, particularly metropolitan cities, remain the best for the last decade. Most urban students are better than rural students because they can provide tuition fee in addition to extensive classroom activities. And we can see around 2.31 lakhs students failed in the exam. Most of them are from the rural areas. So it's clearly mentioned that urban are getting advantage from this education system. Most schools in rural areas have better, rural areas, they have teacher shortage, especially for English and math that Scott already mentioned in his addressing. Not all the teachers receiving training on creative question method. You know, in Bangladesh, we are using this creative question method, but most of the rural teachers, they are not able to get that training perfectly. So they cannot teach the student in the rural areas. The rural schools have insufficient the teachers, and most guardian cannot afford private tutors for their children. We can see that also the existing social inequality, particularly social and economic, all are prevailing in Bangladesh. Schools teachers, they are not actually feel encouraged to take class on regular basis, and there is no strong monitoring system as well. The social distance and also class division, you know, in Bangladesh would deepen if we fail to reduce the gap between urban and rural education. Most of the rural schools lacks, as I already mentioned, the teachers, a library as well as laboratories, because many schools, they are teaching the science in the rural areas, but they don't have laboratory. Can you go in the next slide? A student from the urban well-to-do families avail coaching, you know, private tuition. They have better guidance, food and nutrition, which is totally absent in the rural cases. Education performance of the rural children and migrant children, we can see from China case, they are getting a better treatment than these rural counterparts. Urban students have more advantage in most of the factors investigated in the China compared to their rural counterparts. That is also being observed in Bangladesh as well. Dropout rates in rural areas are very high, say 40 to 57%, we can see from the literature. Unfortunate outcome are for teacher absenteeism and poor quality of teaching due to non-availability of trained teacher and attractive teaching material in rural areas. Next slide, please. And now I am showing some of the features of, in case of Bangladesh, where we need to look in depth for having, I think, equal rural-urban issue. Employed population, we can see 43 million in the rural areas, and urban, it is almost half. And unemployed population, we can see, is higher in the rural areas than in the urban areas. Labor force participation, if we see, then we can see around 60% people are from the rural areas, and 55% are from urban areas. And if we see the involvement of population in agriculture, around less than 40% people are involved from the rural areas, but from the urban areas is very few. But in industry, rural people are engaging around 12%, and urban people are 8%. And in service, we can see rural people are using more and than urban people. In total, 72% rural people are actually engaged in agriculture, industry, and service sector. Unemployed rate, we can see, is less in the rural areas than urban because of formal, informal sector. Unpaid family worker is more in the rural areas, and female labor force, around 40% are in the rural areas. Next slide, please. And if we see a number of person completed different educational level, then we see as SSC and higher secondary, urban people are about 65% compared to rural people only 23%. And if we see nominal income, it's per household, we can see $160, but in urban area is a bit higher. And per capita is $38 only, and in the urban area is 67. So can you go next slide? Yes, when it comes to increasing the quality of education based the characteristics we have seen in our economy, education can serve actually underserved areas. Technology can be the proper channel through which we can achieve that. We can see this sort of suggestion for us, and it is actually applicable for the economy of Bangladesh. There is a growing educational gap between rural and urban areas. Connectivity can help solve it. It is applying in Bangladesh also. In Bangladesh, we are using the Smart School Alliance approach, use a similar idea to self-organized learning environment where children teach themselves through having access to internet. Some of the area of our country, people are getting internet access. So teacher from the urban areas, they are using those technology, and student from the rural areas, they are using that from the YouTube also. So some sort of innovation we can see in our country. Also, Bangladesh Rural Advancement Committee, they are also promoting one program which is from the remote area, boat school program that is helping the rural people. Next, please. So changes and innovation in rural economy, a lot of changes are happening. Actually, new practice of agricultural production, we can see even in the rural areas, poultry, fisheries, and livestock, and new sorts of commercial crops, they are growing in the rural area, and they are getting some sort of new technology. Non-farm activities are increasing in the rural areas that make the strength of rural area and improving the communication in the rural areas. We can see our roads communication is increasing, and that making rural a little bit in advantageous position. Market expansion through communication in technology. Nowadays, people are using this digital technology to communicate each other, and market is moving very fast, and people who are growing product, they are becoming richer than the previous situation. Rate of education in the rural people little bit increased. Motivation to get better education in and migration, people are getting interest to do that. Next, please. So even we can see in the rural areas, kindergarten school are there. So it is moving, but I should say it is slowly and we need to move very fast. Training available in the rural areas through GO and NGOs. You know, a lot of NGOs are working in the Bangladesh economy, so they are working on that. Electricity coverage increased. You know, yesterday our Honorable Prime Minister mentioned that we have electricity in every houses now. So that's the good news, that rural people will have that scope. Emphasis must be given in our vocational institute so that rural people get training facilities there. Business expansion is happening in Bangladesh a lot, so we need some sort of education to get it better. GDP contribution from the rural areas is also increasing, and entrepreneurship, a lot of new entrepreneur is growing in the rural areas, but they need actually quality education. Without having quality education, they cannot move further. So I would finally say that the situation of Bangladesh is moving fast, but intervention for rural education is really very neat, and some sort of international cooperation is also needed to make it strengthening. Thank you very much for getting chance to talk with you.
Thank you very much, Professor Rahman, for reinforcing from your perspective what is being discussed today. Bangladesh is also one of the largest countries in the world and moving very fast. The growth rate was very high, and we also see a lot of effort to invest in human capital development. You highlighted some of the key differences which must be reduced for Bangladesh to move up the value chain. So we'll come back to that later on. Now, the last one, but not the least, we have Ms. Mikyung Shin, who is an education specialist at the Asian Development Bank. Before coming to ADB, she worked for higher education divisions at the Ministry of Education in the Republic of Korea as director and deputy director, which covered university students affairs, employment and startup support, university scholarship, and teaching and assessment in school education. Mikyung, please go ahead. Before you start, I also like to encourage our audience to put questions in the Q&A box so that we'll have lively discussions after this presentation. Mikyung, please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Brajesh, for your kind introduction. Yes, hello, everyone. My name is Mikyung Shin, education specialist in ADB, and I'm really honored to joining this important session. I've always thinking we can do more in secondary education enrollment, increasing the secondary education enrollment, and Dr. Roger's research and his recognition on the rural-urban divide on the secondary education and education divide is really important and very impactful. So I'd like to, in this session, I would like to share the Korean Republic of Korea's policy on high secondary education. So title is the Pursuing Universal Secondary Education and Economic Development in the Republic of Korea. Okay, sorry. The question I want to think about with you is that why did the Republic of Korea pursue universal secondary education when they were lower income country in 1970s? In 1971, our GDP per capita is around 200, And then the second one is how did they achieve universal secondary education with insufficient resources in 1980s, exactly in 1985. And how was the contribution of secondary education for economic development? Okay, let's see our old school enrollments. In case of primary school enrollments, as you see, we almost 100% of school enrollment. This is really beautiful. Yes, but we are still a lot to do for secondary school enrollment. The average of world secondary school enrollment is 80%. And in case of in Asia, 70% in South Asian country and 85% in East Asian countries. And then in this discrepancy, usually mainly rural-urban education inequality gap and girls enrollment gap is the main contributor to this education discrepancy. So the focusing on the universal secondary education, they can be the best beneficiaries. Let me share the characteristics of education expansion in Korea. Korea, in case of they achieved the compulsory primary education in 1955. It's really relatively very fast. They had a Korean War, and from 1950 to 1953. Then considering the situation, that we can imagine the government enthusiasm and dedication for education. And then the enrollment for girls, they are second highest from the world in 1965, next to the North America. And they achieved the universal secondary education in 1985 and achieved universal tertiary education in 1997. So when we, just a moment. When you think of the universal secondary in Korea, they started in 1971. They finished in 1955 the compulsory primary school. And after the 10 years, they are trying to stabilize the primary education. And then 1971, they started to initiate the secondary education and achieved in 1985. And this universal secondary education are evaluated that they are successfully support for industrial transition from labor-intensive industry to heavy and chemical and electronics industries. And they've done a lot of research about how education contributes to economic growth. And then the consistent research are the highest contribution for education economic growth was from secondary education until 1990. And then since 1990, higher education's contribution was increasing. And to do that, they expand of Tibet High School. Right now, the 50% of high school students are attending Tibet High School. And then another strategy is expansion of a private school. And also 50% of students are attending private school. So when we think about education expansion in Korea, that we can see the characteristic, it is a sequential approach of first primary and secondary and tertiary, and the low-cost approach. As I said, they were a very poor country, so the quality could not be good. So sometimes 100 students a class kind of thing. So 2 shift and 3 shift, and then night school class had been operated, and high private sector participate. I will share how they work with private sector, and high priority on equality rather than excellence. Yes, the main main value of Korean education is equality and equity. So sometimes it has been criticized by scholars, but anyway, it functions in this way. And they have special policies and investment for rural areas and the Tibet high schools. So an incentive for teachers who work in rural area. Korean public school teachers rotate 4 years or 8 years. And then if they worked in the rural area like island, they got an additional kind of point, and it is beneficial for their promotion. So they have a lot of incentives and then incentives to encourage these teachers to work in rural area. Okay. So we can think about the budget. Actually, the amount of education expenditure is really important, but the distribution of education expenditure is as important as of that. So they allocated more than 60% of education budget to primary until 1975. So providing opportunity first and improving quality next strategy. So you can see the graph, the primary education investment is growing down, and the second one is secondary is going up. And then this pattern, you can see the Singapore is, and then as in case of Thailand, the secondary education investment is not going up. And then Ghana and Colombia, it is the pattern is intermittent. So we can think about the time we invest more in this secondary education. Then the main strategy to expand the education opportunity is a public-private partnership in secondary education. They provided the teacher salary and administration costs to private schools, and they have various tax exemption for school foundation. And then with this policy, the teacher schools cannot receive the higher cost, higher tuition. So same tuition policy between public and private schools. And the competition to entrance becomes high. So they abolished the middle school and high school entrance exam and advancement exam. And they call it is equalization policy. So they allocate the high school through the lottery, including private school. But this day, since 1980, they gave a room that more autonomous private schools, and the students' choice is increasing. So they are trying to equalization of education environments. But this can be definitely improve the equality, but we still have always autonomy and accountability issue and excellence and equality issues. And then the next one is Tibet high school support. In 1970, Tibet high schools were expanded and supported for industrial structure change. In 1970s, the higher education investment is highly restricted. The investment for Tibet school is really becoming high. If you see the graphs, the government in 1977, government spending on vocational and technical education had almost reached that on higher education. The scholarship provided, and then there was special track for university entrance. Actually, we have 3 presidents graduated from Tibet high schools. So this kind of Tibet focusing policies contribute. Yes, as I mentioned, that secondary educations, how much secondary education contribute to economic growth, and then 50.8% of total contribution of education is analyzed. And it was not researched separately, but we thought that Tibet had a significant effect. And then during that 1970 and during 1990, the investment for higher education was lower than 10% of GDP, but they are trying to, with that restricted money, they trying to invest in the regional area. So the rate expansion of the, in case of higher education in 1980, they become mass education. In 1975, they become universal, enter to the universal education level. In 1950, they're encouraging establishment of higher education. They spend sending students and training abroad with grants. Then after they come back, they participate in the national strategy, becoming faculty at university. And yes, if they experience the severe brain drain, but almost at least at most 10 trainees will come back to Korea. But they become a president of KAIST, they become an institute president, so they lead the overnight advancement in Korean Institute. And in 1970 and 1980, so we were in the military regime, but fortunately they were very strict on the democracy, but they were open to economy and education. Their dedication for education is really high. So even though they have a strong student quota restriction in rural, in a Seoul area, increase the school, but they increase the student quota in region and invest the budget to regional researches related with national prioritized areas. And in 1980s, expanding education opportunity and improve the social equity. And they are focusing on the university entrance system. And actually, university entrance system can be just the education system, but they are as a kind of method or way how to distribute the social value or social income can be. That's why the education can be the could be the ladder to social stratification in Korea. And through that activities and researchers, engineers, and white collar workers are trained, and they contribute to the economic development. And since 1990, they are increasing higher education budget, and right now the R&D expenditure percent of GDP is 4.5%. So that was Korean cases about how they expand the education opportunity. It cannot be it can be one of solution, or some countries can think about how secondary education is important, how we can connect with the higher education policy with the general national strategy. Thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mi-Kyung, for this presentation highlighting how Korea persisted in ensuring equity by evolving the education system in different forms and expanding. Now we see Korea is probably #1 in terms of tertiary enrollment, and R&D, you're saying first in terms of R&D investment. So it's a success story in terms of how investment in human capital can lead to sustained development, because education also deals with knowledge, attitudes and skills, which are all very important to promote this kind of development we are discussing at the moment. We have some questions. I will read some of the questions and then ask you speakers to see how you can address. One question is about migration, relating to in some countries there is preference for male students to go out and seek employment abroad. But what can be done to retain them in the country and also create opportunities for them. That's one question. Another question is about how to support economic hubs by investing in education. If you have seen some examples, that will be good also to show. And then I have some questions, to all of you. So maybe who wants to start? Professor Rahman, you want to start with maybe quick observations, very, very short ones. Please go ahead.
You mean based on the question placed here or overall discussion?
Yes, there are two questions I highlighted.
I will start with the last one. Someone asked whether we can set up any hubs that can enhance the education as well as rural development. Particularly, I can mention in Bangladesh case, yes, some of the industries and they are investing in the rural areas. I will mention, say, new tea garden. It was in the Sylhet area in Bangladesh. Now it moves to the north part of this country. So doing that tea garden shipment, many people are working there, and that laborer are getting educational facilities also through this tea garden owner investment. So like this, many small industries is also moving to the rural areas in Bangladesh, and the workers are getting better education for their children. I personally believe after a few years, that children will have scope to do better job even in the rural areas as well as in the urban areas. I personally believe. So my motivation is that if we can improve the particularly secondary education along with vocational institute through training and hands-on training will be very helpful for changing the economy of Bangladesh, particularly from the rural areas.
Thank you very much.
That is my perception.
Thank you very much. Clarissa, Mikyung, any thoughts on this? Mikyung? If not, I have, I know I'm cognizant of the time. We are almost at the end of the hour. One common thing that came up is quality of education and how to improve that, because at the end of the day, we have to look at the foundation to build on. There was reference to language, mathematics, science, which is well recognized, but then how do we get good teachers in rural areas and the options to address that deficit, either through online learning, which may again have its own problem of digital divide. But still, I think it's worth looking at it given the increase in online learning during this time, but more from digital learning perspective to complement, what we have seen, for example, shift to home-based learning, which is also very important, and also use of retired teachers or, elder students or older students who are performing very well to complement, mobilize this effort. So I know it's a bit broad question, but from your perspective, quick bullet points, maybe 1 minute each, on how you see what can be done to support the government. Clarissa, you want to go ahead?
Sure, Prajesh. I mean, your idea is interesting of former teachers, because being a teacher does require some qualifications before you can just enter a classroom and teach. I think What I'd like to highlight, though, is that at least in the Philippines, we do need to be able to look ourselves in the mirror and understand that what we are dealing with here is not even higher order levels of math, but basic numeracy and literacy challenges. And we need to focus on the foundations of our education system. As Professor Rizal shared in the beginning, if we're able to look in the mirror and really start from the beginning, we can and align on where we want to go, we can then make the investments, even if it is embarrassing to say that we're still struggling with functional literacy at this time, but we need to be able to admit that to ourselves, focus on really getting foundational education to happen en masse across the whole country, and then build from there, and hopefully one day have a story like Mikyung's in South Korea. But it's not going to happen overnight, and it won't happen if we get distracted with higher order level things across the board. And I hope that helps.
Thanks very much. Very practical insight. Mikyung, your thoughts?
Yes, thank you so much, Rajesh. Yeah, actually, the digital technology development gave us challenges, but also gave us opportunity. And if we provided some intervention in rural area, and then they can learn from all over the world, and then they can, if we prepare some materials for a student, and so many people, so many students can learn from here, and teacher can get support from the good materials and good training materials. So we do better trying to think to make a good invention to support them using this technology, using technology development.
Yeah, thank you, Mikyung. Indeed, I think simplification and also integrating, simplifying curriculum and integrating, formative assessment, particularly to track lagging students. That was also one of the success behind Korea's, improvements. So we need to look at more practical solutions. Professor Rahman, any quick thoughts?
Yeah, thank you. Actually, the idea you placed here that retired teachers, online education, YouTube, in our government in Bangladesh, they are trying, particularly due to have this pandemic in this situation to help the rural or urban student. They are suggesting to use this technology, particularly some videos from the very good teachers. They have uploaded it. Even one television channel from the government, they are teaching primary level and high school level as well. So my opinion is, since the COVID situation is little bit improved in our country, so that will be that intervention is important, but that is not the only solution, because people need to have some sort of motivation, particularly the good teacher. Why will they stay in the rural areas and will serve the rural people? Government should have some sort of policy intervention there, and if they take, I think it will be helpful for the rural people. So it is feasible, but it will take time, I personally believe. And one question from Russell, that are there policies or law that I can share with our government so that government will set up agricultural school in the rural areas? Yes, our government is setting up university in the rural areas, particularly in different districts, but not the school. I think we need to suggest our government to have vocational institute where there will be a lot of training program related to agricultural activities that rural youth can take training from there and go for their involvement in that activities. I think that will be helpful.
Thank you very much, Professor Rahman. I'm conscious about the time. We are at the end of this session. Thank you very much. We talked a lot about the general education, quality of education, and the interlinkages, within the education system. There was also some reference to looking at economic hubs, particularly agribusiness, value chain, because relevance is very important, even to motivate people, and particularly when productivity becomes very important, and many countries still have high employment share in agriculture, despite the diminishing share in terms of contribution to GDP. So that the shift has to also look at what are the other opportunities for those who cannot find jobs in rural traditional sector. So that's very important. This also probably has a very close link with formal, informal, because informality is very high, particularly in South Asia, but China's case is also very interesting, where it's growing. So we were able to scratch the surface, but we saw different, perspective. This for the Philippines is one example where we have to also think about alternative ways of getting good teachers, even if it is, not permanent but temporary. But this could unleash, other possibilities, as they have shown. And in terms of Korea, I think a big lesson in how policies and persistent, follow-up in terms of ensuring equity is so critical in the long term, because it is long term, but we have to take, the decisions hands-on. And finally, we had good examples from Bangladesh, which is also a rapidly growing economy and looks very promising going forward with balanced human capital development. So thank you all panelists, speakers for great participation, and also to the audience. I see the number staying stable throughout the session. So if there are any further questions, please send that to us and we'll try to answer that. Mark has posted the link to provide feedback. Please go ahead and provide your feedback on this session. So thank you very much, and we end this session here. Bye now.
Thank you.